Made available thanks to the support of listeners like you. To make a donation of support, log on to aspenpublicradio.org. And thanks.
I've seen all good people turn their heads each day, so satisfied I'm on my way. I've seen all good people turn their heads each day, so satisfied I'm on my way.
Take a straight and stronger course to the corner of your life. Make the White Queen run so fast, she hasn't got time to make you a wife.
Hello and welcome to Check 1-2. I'm your host Daniel Shaw, and that was the unmistakable voice of John Anderson kicking off I've Seen All Good People with his band Yes from their groundbreaking 1971 record, the Yes album. You might hear a very different version of that song Friday night when John plays a solo acoustic show at the Wheeler Opera House. When Anderson and some of his fellow Brits formed Yes about 45 years ago, they helped launch the genre of music that would become known as progressive rock. King Crimson, Genesis, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Rush, and other bands would soon follow, and all of them helped raise the level of musicianship in rock across the board. Yes went on to sell tens of millions of records, elaborate works filled with Anderson's epic lyrical tales of mysterious worlds and forces, all backed by complex but often melodical musical arrangements that the rock world had never before experienced. From 1969 to 79, Yes released an incredible string of 11 albums, and Anderson fronted the band until 2008. Through it all, the heart of the band was Anderson's impossibly soaring voice, one of the most recognizable in rock history. He also composed and arranged most of the band's greatest work, songs like Roundabout, Starship Trooper, and Yours Is No Disgrace. As a solo artist, John has found the time and energy to release 13 albums over the years. His 1976 solo debut, Elias of Sunhillow, is regarded as a progressive rock masterpiece. His other solo work ranges from a collection of Celtic songs to, most recently, the album Survival and Other Stories. John's solo music is quieter and more spiritual than his work with Yes, but no less powerful in its own way. Equally powerful are his acoustic interpretations of Yes songs, and he'll be playing plenty of both at the Wheeler Friday night. Meanwhile, he joins us by phone from his home studio in California. It's just an honor to have him on the show, and John, welcome to Check 1-2.
Excellent. Nice to hear you.
I'm just going to jump right in here and ask you with where did the sound of Yes come from? There was a lot of great music in 1968, but none of it sounded like Yes. And was there a heavy classical music influence?
Well, at that time, we were all sort of coming out of the 60s, having learnt from all the great music of the 60s, from Hendrix to Beatles to Frank Zappa to the modern jazz scene that was happening, Miles Davis and all these kind of things. And it just happened that the group that we put together, everybody came from different parts of England, and they had a different mindset in the music they wanted to be involved in. Bill Bruford, totally jazz drummer. Chris Squire came from a very choral vocalist, great bass, melodic bass. And of course, as the band progressed, we were just having people in the band who were very interested in doing things that were just different. Also,
the lyrics that you wrote were wildly different, very mystical, and they seem to be uniquely British or Celtic, or however you'd like to describe them. We didn't have that here at that time in American music, and we never did.
Lyrics are very interesting because at the time that I started writing songs, it was just at the same time that we started the band, and I could play the guitar just enough to get through an idea, and the lyrics would come very, very fast, and I didn't really, I didn't sort of spend hours and hours burning the midnight oil lamp or whatever it is, rewriting stuff. I'd write something down, and then I'd figure it out and say, well, that's what I'm trying to say, and use lyrics more like a metaphor for thoughts that were going on in my head at that time. Very interested in the search for truth and understanding the world as we knew it at that time. There was Vietnam, there were wars constantly on the TV. There was, a lot of things going on at that time that, a lot of musicians had already said their piece, and I didn't really want to rewrite anything. So I just continued being a little bit more, at times vague, but at times I just wanted to sound the lyrics and make them more I don't know, sometimes more the sound of the words was more interesting than the meaning.
Have you found that your writing differs when you're writing your solo material as opposed to when you're writing for a band, when you're writing for Yes?
It's funny, not really. I tend to write the same way that I wrote before for the last 40 years now. I still enjoy, I do a spontaneous song, I record it, and I listen to what I'm trying to sing, because at the back of my mind I've been thinking about what this energy sounds like, what the melody feels like. I saw something on TV about slavery and young children, so I just wanted to write about that, but again, like in metaphor. And so I'll sing ideas, and then I'll listen to what I'm trying to sing, and it'll actually, if you listen closely, I can hear what I'm trying to say, and I'll just sketch it out and let it rest where it is. And that's how I write, and I've always written that way.
Dawn of a lifeline between the silence and soul sources, chased amid fusions of wonder, in moments hardly seen forgotten, colored in pastures of chance dancing leaves, cast spells of challenge, amused but real in thought, we fled from the sea. Oh, dawn of thought transferred through moments of days and the searching gut we feel.
This is, I guess, I'm thinking, is this the 40th anniversary of, it was really at the time and still considered to be one of the great tours in rock history, the Tales from Topographic Oceans tour in 1974, if I've got that right. And first of all, that album, I don't think could ever get made today. Would you agree?
Well, it's interesting. I think a lot of young musicians gravitate to being adventurous these days, in as much as they will go out and do music that hasn't really been tried out before. So there's always going to be times when young musicians will experiment and come up with something that's a little bit different than the norm. Sometimes it has got nothing to do with the record business or the radio. It's just music that's coming through them. So I'm never saying that this will never happen again, but I think in that early part of the 70s, there was so much adventure in music, and record companies were very, very open for bands like, I think when I did a tour with the first tour we ever did was with The Who. So the lineup for the show was The Who, Rod Stewart and the Faces, Joe Cocker, a guy called, he did a song called Fire, I can't remember his name. Anyway, and Yes opened up. And I remembered on that tour, the great guitar player from The Who, Pete Townsend, sort of came over and said, "I love your band, man, you're really good." And I said, "Oh, amazing, Pete Townsend speaking to me." And then he started to tell me about, I'm just writing this rock opera called Tommy about a deaf, dumb, and blind kid. And I said, I didn't know what to say. I was just amazed that he was creating this new form of music. And he actually did. And that inspired me to think about, when we did Close to the Edge, I wanted to do something radically different, and that became Topographic, which had so many different kinds of music on an album. And I'm sure there are people, especially young musicians, who are thinking along the same lines these days.
I hope so, and I know they're out there. The interesting thing is, for such a different experimental album, it sold very well.
Yeah, well, we were just very lucky at that moment in time. We had a big record with Fragile. Close to the Edge was a big jump and a leap of faith for the audiences, and it worked. And then the record company said, please, make another Fragile, make another Fragile. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm going along this journey. And we took 1 million people with us, and, half of them got it. And it's one of those things that in that moment in time, you're not thinking too much about anything but the music driving you on,
And some of your colleagues have kept doing the giant productions. I'm thinking of Roger Waters in particular, out there doing the wall in stadiums these days.
Yeah.
And do you miss that? I guess circus is the best word for it. Do you miss the circus of the big shows, or did they run their course for you quite some time ago?
I think there was a certain point in time where it just became too much touring and not enough fun. And once you get into that routine of constantly being on the road as a band, it's like a family together, and people don't always get on. It's normal. And there'd be times when we'd be on tour just to pay the tax man and things like that, and it drove me crazy. I'd rather go in the studio and make new music or go and forget about the band for a few months and go and do other things and then get back together. And it's very hard for that to happen all the time. So I really admire bands like U2 who've stuck together over the years and still go out there and do the big shows, and it's not easy. Look at the Rolling Stones, 60 years later, they're still out there doing it.
They're in Asia right now as we speak.
Yeah, it's extraordinary to watch, but it's not something that I miss at all. If it happens again, I'm just starting up with a new band this summer. We're going to do some recording for next year, and if it happens, I'll be very happy. But it's not the reason why you make music,
And can you tell us more about the band at this juncture?
Well, yeah, I got in touch with Jean-Luc Ponty, the beautiful violin player.
Oh, fantastic!
He played on a track that I did with a friend of mine, Michael Lewis, who introduced me to Jean-Luc, and then we got in touch with Jordan Rudess, who was a really ridiculous piano player, keyboard player, and a couple of really great rhythm sections. You got Rayford on drums and Baron on bass, Baron Brown. And these are really very, very funky, sort of slightly sort of cosmic guys. Everybody seems to be on the same sort of planet, which is kind of nice.
So you're heading into the studio this summer, hopefully?
Yeah, we just talked yesterday, and we're hoping to do a couple of weeks in May and a couple of weeks in June.
Great.
And we'll just see what comes.
Yep.
And we've already written some music together via the internet, which is a great modern studio where you can send MP3s to each other and come up with ideas. We've done some of that already, so we're sort of on the way.
When did you hit on the idea to fly solo and acoustic, and were any of the big Yes songs conceived this way initially? Well,
I don't know. I was always driving the band to do long-form ideas because on stage, when you can hold an audience for 20 minutes, the energy is just so powerful, and it's like, it's wild at the end, of course. You have to go through this wonderful musical journey, so I was always into pushing that along. So when I decided to do my solo work, it was simply because I got very sick, and touring was really becoming a dangerous occupation for me. The last tour I did with the band was probably 2005, I think, and I got that 6-month period, I got pneumonia 3 times.
Oh.
And you're on tour, and I'm taking so many drugs to keep myself awake and alive, and then I'd go on stage and the adrenaline would kick in. I could sing, but most of the time I was coughing all the time. So I didn't want to go through that. I didn't want to die on tour. I thought, no, I've got to rearrange my thinking, and I started to do solo shows, and it was a really wonderful, liberating experience.
What would you say is the most challenging song for you to play and sing acoustically all the way through?
Well, there's a song that I do called State of Independence. It's a John and Vangelis song that I wrote years ago, and I performed that towards the end of the show, and I get into this sort of very, I don't know, something that hits me when I kick into that song. It's like I got to sing as though I don't breathe, I don't think, I just get through it, and it's just exciting. And at the end, I feel like I've just climbed a mountain. I'll see how it goes on Friday because I'm already up the mountain.
You're listening to Check 1-2 on Aspen Public Radio. I'm talking to John Anderson, the former lead singer of Yes, who'll be playing at the Wheeler Opera House on Friday night. I also see that you're on board for the Progressive Rock Cruise.
Yeah, we did it 3 weeks ago out of Miami, and it's amazing, actually. Me and my wife had talked about it. We've been asked for the last couple of years to do it. And we sort of shied away from the idea of being on a boat with 2,000 fans, and it's because you don't want to be constantly taking photographs and signing autographs. But it just worked out that we were put on the top of the boat, so we had our own free space and a little sort of deck to work out and sunbathe and relax and then I did 3 shows, and the people were fantastic. There was about 20 groups on stage, on the boat, performing. There was so much different music to listen to, which was fantastic. And then I sang with Transatlantic at the end as a finale. I did Revealing from Topographic, plus And You and I, and Starship Trooper. And everybody went crazy. It was pretty wild.
Yeah, that's become such a big business. It's fascinating. There are some of those boats, like the death metal cruise. I don't think I'd want to be on that boat for a week.
You can imagine the boat shaking constantly.
It's hard to believe, thinking of all these songs. That was Yes's only #1 single, "Owner of a Lonely Heart." Was that the only #1?
Yeah, I mean, we were lucky. We survived. I think we had 2 hit records, Roundabout and Owner of a Lonely Heart, and a couple of minor hits. But we were never created to make hit records. I thought we were too old to make hit records. And we're all late 20s, 25, 26 years old. You have to be 21 and look really cool to make a hit record. That's what I thought. And, I was totally wrong, but that's what drove us on to do music for stage, and that created albums. And within the space of 10 years, we did about 8 albums that really still work today. And that is the incredible situation that we find ourselves in 40 years later, that people still are very excited to hear the music that we created in the 70s. The 80s was a different game. 90125 was #1 around the world, and it was a kind of funny experience to go through, to be #1 in the world. And have this hit record, and it changes your whole perception of the business, and everybody treats you with incredible respect and incredible love and incredible joy in the hope that you're going to make another one. And of course, we didn't do it. We didn't do that. So that spurred us on to create, we did an album later on called Tote, which I spoke to Trevor about this last week. It was such a good album to make, and the last album we did together was Magnification, which is a beautiful album.
Jennifer is a personal trainer. Show me your biceps.
The world changed.
Whoa!
The business changed, and the record companies changed, and it wasn't necessarily worth record companies to promote because they felt, well, it's not really commercial enough. Well, music isn't supposed to be always commercial. Music is music,
Well, and speaking of the music business, how do your recordings, they're incredible, and the playing, the singing, the production quality. How do you feel about the digitalization of music? And we only really hear apparently a fraction of what goes into it.
I don't know. I don't have any problems so much.
And hyper-muscular is kind of like what I am, but
there's a lot of great music out there. It's interesting, over the last 20 years, we became connected to world music, and, sometimes I'm listening to recordings of singers from Bulgaria and percussion from Africa. There's these water drums, these tribes that play the water when they're washing their clothes and things. Then they get into rhythms, and you can actually Google water drumming, and it's beautiful to be able to be in a world where you're surrounded by so much music. And so I don't really miss the vinyl, the idea of vinyl. I just know that we're collectively going through such an incredible period of a state of consciousness around the world musically, that we're all connected musically, And now and again a great pop song comes up and Bruno Mars starts doing his dancing and everybody's loving music, and it's great. But I'm listening to Rachmaninoff's Third piano concerto constantly for some some reason. I've just got into this. And Trevor Rabin sent me an email yesterday. He'd just written a piano concerto for Lang Lang, one of the great
Oh, you're kidding, yeah.
pianists. And he sent it to me. I've listened to it 5 times. I listened to it this morning. It's just unbelievable. And I'm writing Rachmaninoff's Fourth. I started writing a piano concerto since I saw this wonderful guy, Robert Tice, perform Rachmaninoff's Third locally a month ago. I said, I've got to write a piano concerto. And there's Trevor already doing it. It's kind of fun.
That's fun. I think many of us spent hours unfolding and refolding the Yes album art and reading liner notes. And do you think I still have I look at those albums, and it was really an incredible series of covers. And do you think that contributed to the band's success in a major way?
For sure. It was like a package, you know. You could package an album. I think Tommy was one of the great album covers of all time. And of course, the Beatles with Sgt. Pepper. It was just that period of time that record companies would invest in presenting the record, the album to people, and the sleeve was important. So when we found Roger Dean, it just became like an imprint on the band that we are that look, you know. And it's funny, Roger Dean's artwork, you know, if you look at the movie, if you look at Avatar, there's Roger Dean's artwork all over it.
Of course.
And I spoke with one of the guys who worked on it, and they knew that there were certain parts of that work that was attributed to Roger's work, and they loved Yes music, and it was like so much connection over those many, many years, you know.
That's one thing I think we've lost a little of. I hope music packaging somehow gets more creative, even online. Last year, Rush got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and is this something you'd like to see for Yes?
I'm sure it will happen. You know, we got nominated last year and we didn't get through this year, so we could probably get nominated next year and get in, I think. I think it's a good time for it to happen. Going back to your artwork idea of record companies and everything, because they've now become sort of not part of my world anyway. I'm always thinking of releasing music with visual art and computer animation, so that when you play my next album, you can watch it on the screen at the same time on your computer. That's what I believe is the next step. It's an obvious next step. You know, if you play YouTube, iTunes, you know, they've got this wonderful thing on iTunes. I think it's called, I'm just going to look it up, Visualizer. You can actually watch the music play because it's connected to the music, and it's really beautiful. So we're along those lines. As for getting back in the Hall of Fame, I'll let you know.
Okay. And who do you think is carrying the progressive rock flag well today? Especially you were just on that with a whole bunch of bands. And
yeah, there was a couple of really good bands. One called Anathema. They were from Liverpool.
Okay.
And I saw a band in Australia. I really like them. Will Call. You know, they do this wonderful sort of fusion music, and all of a sudden they're into a song and then back fusion music, and it really works very well. But there's a lot of music out there that's more progressive than that. Very, I'd say, electronic symphonic. I hear it now and again. So we're lucky.
Thank you so much for being on Check 1-2. We would look forward to seeing you Friday night at the Wheeler Opera House.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Check 1-2 with John Anderson, the former lead singer for Yes. I want to thank John for joining us. He'll be at the Wheeler on Friday night, March 14th, and it'll be a great night of classic songs and stories. To learn more about John or about what's happening at the Wheeler, go to aspenpublicradio.org. I'm Daniel Shaw, and thank you for listening to Check 1-2 on Aspen Public Radio. I'll leave you with John's solo acoustic version of one of my favorite Yes songs, And You and I.
Thanks for listening to this show from Aspen Public Radio. Archive podcasts, news, and more are made available thanks to the support of listeners like you. To make a donation of support, log on to aspenpublicradio.org. And thanks.